Picture this. You're living 50,000 years ago. No phones, no supermarkets, no comfy beds. Every day is about survival. Finding food, avoiding predators, and impressing that special someone in the tribe. Evolutionary psychology is all about how those struggles shaped the way our minds work today. And once you see it, you'll never look at human traits the same way again. Evolutionary psychology is an approach within psychology that seeks to explain human behavior and mental processes through the lens of evolutionary history. It aims to understand the functions of our organs, psychological mechanisms, and behavior by examining how they developed as adaptations to problems faced by our ancestors. These problems included challenges such as survival, reproduction, finding food, and defending against predators. The key interest of evolutionary psychology is therefore the human evolution and genetic continuity over evolutionary time, rather than individual development. Thus, it focuses on human nature and universal psychological mechanisms, and much less on individual differences. Evolutionary psychology has a simple rule of thumb. If a trait is universal, inborn, and adaptable, evolution probably shaped it. Let's break down what that really means. Universality means that a trait is present across all humans regardless of geographical, cultural, or social differences. For example, basic emotions are universal. People everywhere display and recognize expressions of happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. Innateness refers to traits that are inherent or inborn, meaning we possess them from birth, without needing to be taught. The adaptiveness of traits refers to their capacity to be flexible and manifest in different forms. Through adaptation to the environment, even fundamental traits can change or be expressed in varied ways. Two important concepts in evolutionary psychology are the phenomena of genetic variability and mutations. Any genetic variability in human traits arises from mutational changes in functional regions of the genome. The spread of a gene mutation across an entire population takes roughly 1,000 to 10,000 generations, which would equal 20,000 to 200,000 years for a human population. Through this process, over many generations, variants that are more successful in survival and reproduction replace less successful ones. That is how traits become widespread within a species. This mechanism is responsible for the origins of fundamental characteristics in all organisms. Evolutionary psychology recognizes three different types of mutations. Those are positive, neutral, and harmful mutations. Neutral mutations are changes in the DNA sequence that do not alter the structure or function of proteins, nor do they affect the regulation of genes. Because they have no significant impact on the organism's fitness, they provide neither a selective advantage nor a disadvantage. Both positive and harmful mutations, however, can influence gene regulation, leading to changes in an organism. If such mutations occur in reproductive cells, they can be passed on to offspring and may spread through a population over generations. An example of a positive mutation would be our ability to digest milk in adulthood. By default, lactose intolerance is the normal state, since most mammals lose the ability to break down milk sugar, called lactose, after childhood. In humans, however, a genetic mutation occurred that allowed the lactase enzyme to persist into adulthood. This mutation evolved in close conjunction with the domestication of milk-producing animals, such as cows, goats, and sheep, which began around 10,000 years ago in the modern-day Middle East. The ability to digest milk then gradually spread in populations where milk consumption provided a significant dietary advantage. This is an example of a positive mutation, one that spreads through a population because it provides a clear adaptive benefit, in this case, the ability to digest milk. Harmful mutations are random disruptions of complex functioning. They are harmful because they reduce adaptability, resulting in maladaptation. Examples include diseases such as cystic fibrosis, Huntington's disease, and phenylketonuria. Albinism is yet another example of harmful mutation, especially in animals. It results from mutations in genes involved in the production of melanin, which is a pigment. Because melanin affects the color of skin, hair, feathers, scales, and eyes, albinism means a complete or nearly complete absence of pigment. This results in many negative consequences for animals living in the wild. One consequence is greater exposure to predators, as albino animals stand out in their environment and are easier to spot. Secondly, lack of pigment in the eyes affects the development of the retina and optic pathways, which leads to impaired vision. Another disadvantage is sensitivity to UV radiation. Without melanin, animals are more prone to sunburn and skin tumors. Those animals may face difficulties in social interactions, as in some species, body coloration is important for communication or attracting mates. Albinism can thus reduce reproductive success. In nature, albino animals are very rare and typically face reduced chances of survival. That is true because of natural selection. It counteracts disruptive changes by eliminating harmful mutations from the population. But why is natural selection important, and how does it result in evolutionary changes? Every species has a high reproductive potential. So high that, if all individuals reproduce successfully, population size would increase exponentially. But natural resources are limited. If populations expanded exponentially, there would soon be shortages of living space, food, water, and materials for nests or shelters. Producing more offspring than the environment can support leads to a struggle for existence among individuals in a population. Within each generation, only a portion of the offspring survive. Individuals within a population vary in their traits, and much of this variability is heritable. Thus, survival in the struggle for existence is not purely random. It is at least partly dependent on inherited traits. Individuals whose traits are better suited to a particular environment are more likely to survive and have more offspring. In short, natural selection ensures that, in a particular population, only the best adapted win the battle for limited resources such as food, partners, habitat, etc. Thus, the best adapted survive and reproduce. This way, they create offspring that are well adapted to the environment and conditions until those change. So, in short, unequal ability to survive and reproduce gradually changes the population. Advantageous traits accumulate across generations. In essence, natural selection means that circumstances, such as environment, predators, parasites, diseases, temperature, and the availability of water and food, determine which traits are quote-unquote better. Or rather, which traits increase the likelihood of survival and reproduction. In this way, maladaptive traits are eliminated while adaptive traits persist. Now, let's talk about those adaptive traits. Adaptation is an anatomical structure, physiological or psychological process or behavior that made it easier for our ancestors to survive and reproduce compared to other members of their species. Adaptations are heritable traits that originate as positive mutations. Those mutations are preserved by natural selection because they are better suited to the environment than alternative traits. Some important adaptations include lungs, heart, and muscles. Lungs enable quick and effective gas exchange. Animals can inhale and exhale larger volumes of air, allowing oxygen to enter the bloodstream and carbon dioxide to be expelled. Heart and the circulatory system ensure blood circulation. By pumping blood, the heart delivers oxygen and nutrients to all organs. This is especially crucial for larger, more mobile animals, where fast and efficient tissue supply is vital. In smaller, slower-moving organisms, a developed heart pump is less necessary. Muscles enable body movement. They allow animals to move faster and more efficiently, which is key for finding food, escaping predators, and reproducing. These were the examples of anatomical or biological adaptations. Psychological adaptations are mental processes that enhanced survival and reproduction in the past, primarily by enabling more efficient processing of information. For example, brain, like other organs, evolved through adaptation. A simple model of brain evolution is given by MacLean's triune brain theory, which suggests that the human brain is essentially three brains in one: the reptilian complex, the limbic system, and the neocortex. Reptilian brain evolved in vertebrates approximately 500 million years ago. It is a characteristic of fish, amphibians, and reptiles. It includes the brainstem and basal ganglia. It is responsible for the basic life functions, such as breathing, heartbeat, blood pressure, and the sleep cycle. It is also responsible for instinctive behaviors, such as fight, flight, reproduction, and territoriality. It ensures survival without complex thought. The old limbic system, or paleomammalian brain, emerged with early mammals approximately 200 million years ago. It includes hippocampus, amygdala, septum, parts of the thalamus and hypothalamus. It is responsible for the regulation of emotions. It is also responsible for memory and linking physiological reactions with feelings, for example, increased heart rate when afraid. Neocortex, or neomammalian brain, expanded in higher mammals approximately 60 million years ago, especially in primates, with its greatest development in humans. The neocortex is the outer layer of the brain with cell layers. It is responsible for complex thought, perception, spatial reasoning, goal-directed movement, self-reflection, and consciousness. Psychological adaptations also gave rise to other essential functions and traits, many of which are rooted in primary drives such as survival and reproduction. Personality traits are also interpreted in evolutionary terms as more or less adaptive characteristics that aided species survival. However, just like any trait within a population, personality features can be highly beneficial in some contexts, but unfavorable in others. For example, high neuroticism is strongly linked with high behavioral inhibition system sensitivity. Behavioral inhibition system is responsible for increased awareness of potential danger. It induces cautious behavior, risk assessment, heightened arousal, and often rumination and anxiety. In short, it is responsible for being aware of the potential danger and always being prepared for a reaction when danger occurs. In some cases, high behavioral inhibition system sensitivity can be a disadvantage because it can lead to behavior inhibition and reduced exploration. Individuals with high behavioral inhibition system sensitivity also tend to struggle with novel or uncertain contexts, which can hinder adaptive engagement or exploration. However, in other cases, it can be a very advantageous trait. It encourages threat detection and avoidance, which can enhance survival in dangerous environments. It is also connected to non-hazardous behavior, which increases the likelihood of survival. Emotions are another powerful social adaptation that helps us live together, cooperate, and survive as a group. To illustrate this, let's consider a few examples. From an evolutionary perspective, anger protects resources and status. In humans, anger often arises when someone violates personal boundaries. For example, if someone pushes into your personal space, expressing anger signals, "Stop. Respect my limits." This reduces the chance of repeated violations. Similar mechanisms exist in animals. Male monkeys, for instance, bare their teeth and produce loud threat calls when their territory is challenged. These displays can prevent fights because the warning is often enough to deter intruders. Shame and guilt may feel uncomfortable, but they're essential for maintaining social harmony. In humans, after doing something unfair or wrong, people often display signs of shame, such as avoiding eye contact, lowering the head, and speaking softly. These cues show others, "I know I messed up. Please don't reject me." This helps reduce conflict and rebuild trust. Many social animals show similar behaviors. In wolf packs, subordinate members adopt submissive postures, like crouching and avoiding eye contact, to signal acceptance of lower status. This prevents aggression from the dominant individual and preserves group stability. In humans, empathy drives parental care, helping behavior, and even altruism towards strangers. When we see someone in distress, empathy motivates us to offer comfort or assistance. Empathy and altruism can be seen in animals too. Chimpanzees console distressed group members with gentle touches and even share food with hungry companions. These behaviors increase survival not just for the individual, but for the whole group. To better understand altruism from an evolutionary perspective, we turn to inclusive fitness theory, introduced by William Hamilton in 1964. Fitness is the reproductive success of an individual, meaning how well they survive and produce offspring that can also survive and reproduce. Meanwhile, inclusive fitness is the success of passing genes on to the next generation, directly or via relatives. Hamilton concluded that what matters is not only one's own offspring, but also the survival and reproduction of genetically related individuals. In other words, it benefits animals if members of their family tree also survive and reproduce. Altruistic behaviors, such as helping relatives, are therefore ultimately selfish at the genetic level. According to Hamilton, caring for others, especially kin, serves to increase the chance that our genes, or similar ones, will be passed on. Now that we've covered adaptations, let's address the elephant in the room. Some of those adaptations just don't make sense anymore. They helped our ancestors survive, but why do we still carry them today? The answer lies in the mismatch theory. The ancestral environment in which humans evolved is the key to understanding why certain behaviors exist today. Some of the strategies our ancestors developed in response to their environment still guide us today, even in environments very different from those of our ancestors. Because the environment has changed extremely rapidly in the last few thousand years, especially over the last 200 years, our evolutionary-shaped mechanisms are often no longer optimal in modern contexts. This is why many behaviors or traits today may seem irrational, but make sense from an evolutionary perspective. But why does mismatch occur? On one hand, our evolution is slow. Adaptations develop over thousands or millions of years. On the other hand, environment has changed too fast due to technology and urbanization. Therefore, brains and bodies are still tuned for life as hunter-gatherers, rather than modern life. Let me provide some examples of mismatch. For most of human history, food scarcity, not abundance, was the central challenge. Sugars and fats used to be very rare. Survival often depended on locating and consuming calorie-dense foods that could sustain individuals through unpredictable periods of famine. Evolutionary psychologists reference the thrifty gene hypothesis, which suggests that genes favoring efficient fat storage were positively selected because they helped individuals endure famines. Today, however, food is abundant, especially processed sugar and fat. But our bodies still crave calorie-dense foods. That mismatch can sadly lead to obesity and related diseases. From an evolutionary perspective, many common human fears developed as adaptive mechanisms that increased our ancestors' chances of survival. For example, fear of spiders or snakes helped early humans avoid potentially life-threatening encounters with venomous animals. These fears are deeply rooted in the brain's amygdala, which rapidly detects threats and triggers fight-or-flight responses. In the modern world, however, these ancient fears are often disproportionate to the actual level of danger. For instance, while very few spiders or snakes pose serious harm today, people may still experience intense fear or even phobias in their presence. Meanwhile, modern threats such as traffic accidents, electricity, or interpersonal violence can be far more lethal, but don't always trigger the same instinctive fear responses. That's because these dangers are relatively recent in evolutionary terms. Our brains have not had enough time to develop automatic, hardwired fears of them. This one can be explained using the Dunbar's number. Dunbar's number is a theoretical limit to the number of stable and meaningful social relationships a person can maintain. Meaningful relationships are the ones you form with individuals you know personally and have some kind of reciprocal social bond with. Dunbar studied the correlation between primate brain size, specifically neocortex, and average social group size. By applying this correlation to humans, Dunbar proposed that people can comfortably maintain about 150 meaningful relationships. Beyond this number, the complexity of maintaining stable and cohesive connections becomes cognitively overwhelming. In short, a stable community size that is not cognitively overwhelming for humans includes about 150 relationships. Modern life, however, involves thousands of social contacts, including digital interactions. But our brains haven't evolved to handle that. Trying to keep up with too many interactions can overwhelm us and can lead to stress, loneliness, and anxiety. In essence, we can contact thousands, but emotionally, we still depend on the much smaller number of people. That gap between unlimited reach and limited cognitive capacity is a major reason why modern social life can feel both overconnected and lonely at the same time. The fight-or-flight reaction evolved as a powerful survival mechanism. When faced with immediate physical threats, such as predators or hostile environments, the body's sympathetic nervous system activates. It releases hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. This produces rapid physiological changes, such as increased heart rate, heightened alertness, and mobilization of energy, which prepare the individual to either confront danger or escape it. In ancestral environments, this reaction was typically short-lived and highly adaptive, since the threat either passed quickly or ended in decisive action. However, in the modern world, the same system is frequently triggered by chronic and non-physical stressors, such as demanding jobs, financial insecurity, social pressures, or the constant stimulation of digital technology. These stressors can persist for days, weeks, or even years, keeping the stress response activated far longer than it was ever designed to be. Chronic stress is linked to cardiovascular disease, hypertension, weakened immune function, sleep disturbances, anxiety, and depression. In evolutionary psychology, differences between males and females are seen as the result of evolutionarily shaped strategies of behavior. These develop to ensure mate acquisition and reproduction. Mate acquisition behaviors are strategies for attracting and securing partners. Reproductive behaviors are strategies related to reproduction itself. These strategies determine the differences between males and females in anatomy, physiology, and behavior. Evolutionary psychology recognizes two types of selection, which are intersexual and intersexual selection. Intersexual selection means that members of one sex, typically females, create competition among the opposite sex by choosing mates with certain traits, for example, the peacock's tail. Intersexual selection is the competition within the same sex for access to mates, which is more common among males. This leads to the evolution of greater strength, larger body size, or traits and organs used for intimidation and aggression, for example, antlers. Those maximize the likelihood of being chosen for reproduction. From an evolutionary perspective, the typical roles of each sex have also shaped their physical traits. In many species, males often provide resources such as food, so being larger, stronger, or faster increases their chances of success. Because they must also attract mates, males are also often more colorful or ornamented than females. In contrast, females usually invest more in caring for offspring and must protect both themselves and their young from predators, so they are often less conspicuous in appearance. Their more camouflaged coloration helps them stay hidden and safe, while nesting or rearing young. Another difference between males and females is how they care for offspring. According to evolutionary theory, females tend to adopt a high investment strategy, meaning they prioritize the survival and well-being of each offspring over sheer numbers. That is because they invest heavily in their young through pregnancy, nursing, care, and feeding. Males, on the other hand, often follow a low investment strategy, meaning they aim to produce as many offspring as possible to increase the likelihood that their traits and genes will spread. Unlike females, they do not carry or nurse the offspring and can impregnate multiple mates at the same time. This principle was formalized in parental investment theory by Robert Trivers in 1972. However, this does not mean that males never invest in offspring. In some species, such as birds, males also care for the young. For example, the male albatross invests enormously in the offspring, often becomes attached to one partner for life, and is very selective in searching for a partner. Evolutionary psychology rejects the idea that beauty is in the eye of the beholder and that standards of human beauty are purely arbitrary. From an evolutionary perspective, beauty can be seen as an adaptation in mate selection. In other words, attractiveness signals important qualities of a potential partner. Traits we perceive as beautiful often signal health, fertility, or good genetics. Evolution programmed us to find these traits attractive because they increased reproductive success. In humans, facial symmetry is seen as more attractive than asymmetry because bodily asymmetry has been linked to premature birth, certain psychological disorders, and lower intelligence. In women, traits such as fuller lips, a smaller chin, and high cheekbones are linked to the female hormone estrogen and are thus perceived as more attractive. Testosterone, on the other hand, is linked to a strong jawline, pronounced cheekbones, and thick eyebrows. Body shape also plays a role in perceived attractiveness. One of the most robust findings comes from research by Singh in 1993, who concluded that waist-to-hip ratio of around 0.7 in women is consistently judged as most attractive. It is associated with higher fertility and lower risk of disease. In men, however, broad shoulders, good chest-to-waist ratio, and muscularity are said to signal physical strength and protective ability. But for both men and women, traits such as humor, confidence, and intelligence indicate cognitive ability and social skills linked to survival and reproductive success. A study of 400 university students found that intelligence predicted humor production ability, which in turn was linked to greater mating success for both men and women. Some analyses, however, suggest women prioritize humor production in partners, while men appreciate their partner's humor receptivity. Confidence is often seen as attractive because it conveys emotional stability, competence, and social effectiveness. Some evolutionary theories suggest that women may find confidence particularly compelling in men, as it may signal leadership, security, or resource-providing capability. Intelligence is a consistently valued trait in mate selection and is tied to cognitive ability, resource acquisition, and health, all of which link to reproductive value. Animals also evolve traits that attract the opposite sex. This is more noticeable in males, since it is their strategy of attracting females. Peacock, for example, flaunts its tail. Large, symmetrical tails indicate good health. Females choose males with the most impressive tails because they ensure strong genetic material. Birds are also known for their amazing vocals. Males capable of long, complex songs demonstrate health and energy, maximizing the likelihood of being chosen by the females. Mammals, on the other hand, show off in fight battles. Males fight to show their strength and good genes to potential mates. Female selects the male who won the fight. The key takeaway from this chapter is that, from an evolutionary perspective, physical and behavioral traits we perceive as attractive are not arbitrary. They evolved as signals of health, fertility, genetic quality, and resource potential, thereby increasing reproductive success. If you've made it to the end of this video, let us know which chapter you enjoyed the most. We might expand on that topic in one of our upcoming videos. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about evolutionary psychology? Do you feel it explains the principles and phenomena we explored today well? And of course, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content like this.